Hello, my name is Caroline, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, One Opinion from Europe. I've lived in Germany now for over 40 years, but I actually grew up in London. I became a chartered accountant and then I moved out to Germany, and my partner is Italian. So I have both the British nationality as well as the German, and I also speak Italian fluently. And having been a CFO in international corporations over the past 30 years, I have also seen a lot of the world and have been very much involved in making business decisions throughout the world. Over the past 10 years, I've been very concerned about what is happening in the US, and I would like to share here just one European opinion with you on certain events. And today I'd like to take a look at tariffs, obviously a very current topic. I will start off looking at the beginning of the second Trump administration. And then I would like to go on to Liberation Day together with the process of tariffs throughout the past 12 months. I would also like to take a look at Donald Trump's psychology because I feel that this plays a major role in this whole tariff debacle. And then finally, we will take a look at the SCOTUS decision that was announced on Friday and what we can take from this decision. So let's take a look at the beginnings of Donald Trump's second administration. Now, he was voted in on a campaign where he claimed that the word tariffs was his favorite word. He was going to make America great again because all these foreign countries were going to pour so much cash into the USA based on these tariffs. Now, it was very clear to me that tariffs are not paid by the foreign countries. Tariffs will be ultimately paid by the American consumers. And it seems very strange to me that about 70 million Americans actually fell for this lie and still voted for Trump and ultimately voted to increase their own taxes. I can only assume that either they didn't do their research or they really just believed what Donald Trump was telling them, or that maybe, and it might be a combination of all things, that the Democrats were not able to bring the case over that tariffs are basically a sales tax. Today, we see people complaining about tariffs and how everything has become so much more expensive, coffee, bananas, whatever. And I think, well, people, why didn't you just think about this before you voted for it? He was very vocal, very loud about what was going to happen. The second thing, which seems completely illogical to me, was in fact his logic for implementing tariffs was because there was a crisis because the USA had such an immense trade deficit with all these countries. Now, as I mentioned, I've been a CFO for many years, and that is not my definition of a crisis. When I go to the supermarket and I buy groceries for 80 euros, I pay the supermarket 80 euros. I don't get cash back from the supermarket. So under Donald Trump's logic, I would have a trade deficit with my supermarket. But that's not true because I come out with a basket full of groceries with a value of 80 euros. So this logic is completely wrong in my view, in my financial perspective. And I can't see how people like Stephen Hassett or Scott Bessent can stand there and basically with a straight face still try to convince people that tariffs are solving some crisis which doesn't actually exist. Another reason which was given for introducing tariffs was to bring manufacturing back into the USA. Now, as I mentioned, I've been a CFO and I've had to approve many investment decisions for moving manufacturing to certain different countries. And if I was today being asked to make or to approve a business decision to start manufacturing in the USA, I would not vote for it. I would not give my approval. The uncertainty of what is happening today with all these tariffs in the USA is just such a huge financial risk for any business looking to invest. I would postpone this investment to after the Donald Trump administration, or I would look to find a different, much more stable economy to do this investment. And finally, it was also going to make America great again. GDP was going to be 10% or even 20%, who knows, whatever it was going to be. Now the numbers have just come out for Q4 2025, 1.4%, significantly below what was the GDP in the previous administration. And even despite this inflow of tariffs, which are actually being paid by American consumers, we cannot see the positive impact on GDP. So let's take a look at the introduction of these tariffs. We all remember Liberation Day, Trump standing there with his huge posters of these so-called reciprocal tariffs. These made just no sense whatsoever. I remember sitting there, throwing my head in my hands and thinking, this is just going to be an absolute disaster. The formula behind how they came across these percentages was just completely illogical. And ultimately what happened, the stock market crashed, and in true Donald Trump fashion, he put the whole thing on hold for a month or two. I can't remember exactly. But in the meantime, he was throwing huge tariffs, over 200% at China and at Canada, and was causing a whole amount of disruption and worry about what was going to happen. I still don't think that the Americans really even then understood what was going on, or not half of the Americans understood what was happening. And I was too very disappointed to see my European leaders go and visit Trump and do the appeasement route, bring him gifts and say how wonderful he was and everything like that. It just really went against my grain. And because I just see it as one major extortion racket of his. And this was just not what I was looking to see from my European leaders. The mood has now changed, but we will get into that. And I think the breaking point was actually this whole debacle about Greenland. Trump is, in fact, a bully. And we all know that if you appease a bully, he's just going to come back and see you weak, and he'll just come in even harder on whatever he's looking to squeeze out of you. What also happened was that many investment decisions being planned for the USA basically were put on hold. As an example, Audi, who is a major car manufacturer here in Germany, were planning a major manufacturing location in the USA. That is now on hold. And I know there are various other European companies who have put projects on hold. And myself, as a CFO, I would not give a green light for a project or a major investment into the USA at the moment. So it has basically had the contrary effect to what Donald Trump was looking for. And he still claims that all these major companies are pouring trillions into the USA, which I don't believe a word of it. What also happened was that countries such as Canada were looking to set up trade agreements with other countries. They were now decided to bypass the US and were looking to improve trade agreements or trade discussions with countries like China. The Europeans have set up 2 trade agreements, one with India and one with the Mercosur countries. So all of this trade is now being channeled away from America. So I don't think that Donald Trump will achieve any of his goals by using these tariffs. Now, I'd like to take a look at the psychology of Donald Trump. It has been asserted that he is a malignant narcissist, and he is definitely a bully. We see that he gets great pleasure out of shaking down world leaders. He acts as a mob boss, and any type of threatening actions or blackmail gives him a sense of power. There was a nice example which Jen Psaki mentioned on MS Now recently of Vietnam. On Liberation Day, Donald Trump gave Vietnam a reciprocal tariff of 46%. His Trump organization was currently in the process of applying for approvals for a major investment in Vietnam. They were planning on constructing a hotel, a 36-hole golf course, a complete residential area. And the legal process for these approvals in Vietnam normally would take about 2 to 4 years. Now, what happened after Donald Trump had issued this tariff on Vietnam? All of a sudden, within a period of 3 months, the Trump organization received the appropriate approvals. Well, there you go. And Trump actually reduced the tariff, I believe, down to 16%. A similar situation occurred with Brazil. His buddy, Jair Bolsonaro, who also a year after Donald Trump had tried his coup, Jair Bolsonaro tried a coup in Brazil against his government, which luckily failed. And the Brazilians were much more up to speed than the Americans. They arrested him immediately, and ultimately he was sentenced to a lifetime in prison. Now, Donald Trump felt personally aggrieved by this and just issued a 50% tariff on Brazil. Now, also these tariffs, I mean, how can America grow coffee? They can't. So the American consumers have basically had to live the past 12 months with this 50% tariff on Brazil, basically stemmed out of a blackmail attempt from Donald Trump against the Brazilian government. Luckily, the Brazilian government resisted. And as we see now, all global tariffs are going down to 15%. Anyway, there was also another situation which has recently gone through the news media about Switzerland. The president of Switzerland, she had lavished gifts on Donald Trump, a very high value watch, a gold bar, and she was trying to get her 30% tariff reduced down. Now, Donald Trump felt that she had rubbed him up the wrong way. And so what did he do? He increased it to 39%. And he was obviously gleeful about how he had done this. So these tariffs are not just an economical policy which he is introducing in America. It is his psychology. He needs tariffs to play the strong man. But what happens to a bully when you resist a bully? When he comes to take your lunch money and then you give it to him and he comes back the next day, he wants double your lunch money. Now, if the first attempt you resist and you punch him on the nose, he won't come back. And this was very quickly seen when he got the title Taco Trump. Trump always chickens out. So it became very clear to me that the only way to deal with this, to get a positive outcome for your country, is to resist. Finally, I would say my European leaders, once they had gone through this horrific situation of Donald Trump trying to take over Greenland, which was a disgrace considering that Greenland is a NATO ally, belongs to Denmark. And we all know that the NATO allies jumped to the defense of the US after 9/11. And Donald Trump, he has no feeling of loyalty. He does not have this concept. For him, loyalty is a one-way street and it only goes in his direction. So he was out to get Greenland, and ultimately our European leaders, they stood up to him. They threatened significantly higher tariffs or even a complete embargo of US trade. And only then did he finally back down. I think now the message is understood here in Europe that this is the only way to deal with Trump. Appeasement is not a successful strategy when you deal with a bully. So this is Donald Trump's psychology that needs to be dealt with. It's not just an economic policy. So where do we stand today? Well, we all saw last Friday the Supreme Court issued its decision and deemed Trump's tariffs to be illegal. He had invoked the IEEPA Act, and this was completely unconstitutional. I must admit, as we say here in Germany, we suffered a moment of Schadenfreude. And as we also expected, at the presser held after the decision had been made public, he had a wonderful meltdown. Like a 3-year-old toddler, he was insulting every man and his dog, but specifically the 6 Supreme Court justices who had ruled against him. He also had his knee-jerk reaction where he imposed immediately 10% global tariff using a different section, which probably is not legal either. And then the next day, just to double down even more, because it was just so much fun, he then upped the ante to 15%. Now, one thing which is very important, I think most of the world has now realized that Trump's power is diminishing. The immediate reaction over the weekend of India, who were about to sign a deal with America, was to say, well, let's just take our time with this. Let's just see how things go. But they were very polite about it. And they are not stupid. They realize that this new section, which Trump is trying to use, only has a lifespan of 150 days. So, of course, they are trying to run out the clock. Luckily, also my European leaders took a similar road. They were also due to sign off on a deal with Trump. And they have now said, well, there's no hurry, there's no rush. Let's take a look at what the actual legal basis is now, and we'll take it as it comes. Thankfully, Friedrich Merz, our German chancellor, he was very determined on this route, and there's no more wishy-washy. Well, let's see if we can try and be his friend again. So that was very good. One open issue is the issue of refunds. Now, as I see it, if I go and steal my neighbor's TV and I get caught and the judge says that that was illegal, then for me, that is clear. I have to return the TV. But Trump, and especially Scott Bessent, has said it straight out loud, they don't feel themselves obligated to refund all of these illegal tariffs, which were paid ultimately by the American consumer. Now, I can understand that the refund process will be quite complex because initially the tariffs were paid by US companies. So the refund would go to the US companies, and how would they know who to refund of the American public? But I thought the governor, J.D. Pritzker, made a good suggestion that the government just refund $1,700 to all of his households in Illinois. Now, we will see what happens. I really do hope that the American consumers do get a refund, and that they hopefully have also seen that you cannot trust anything that Donald Trump tells you, and hopefully they will be more discerning when they listen to what he has to say. Anyway, I'm sure this whole tariff saga will still continue, and so we can definitely go on and discuss it further, maybe in a follow-up episode. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed listening to my European view of things. Please feel free to give me a like and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions or comments, or if there are any other subjects you would like me to touch upon, my first episode, I was discussing ICE compared to the German Gestapo. My mother, she grew up in Nazi Germany, so I have some real family input on that subject. And other subjects which I would like to also go into, subjects like SCOTUS, or your media, or the big lie, which is something we just do not understand here in Europe. So please feel free to give me some feedback as to what you would like me to cover. Thank you very much for getting this far, and take care. Bye.